Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome indeed, yes, to another edition of the Mark Moses Show podcast. As we're always broadcasting from the Anidjar and Levine Accident Attorney Studios. Take back control of your life. Yes, call them today. It's Anidjar and Levine Accident Attorneys. And to recap, that crazy, physical, big-time win for the Orlando Magic last night there at the Kia Center is a guy who does a great job with the Orlando Sentinel, and I'm happy to finally get him on. He's a busy man, Jason Beede. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm pretty surprised at where we are in this series. Watching this team up very closely throughout the entire year, I would never have guessed that they would be up 3-1 on the number 1 seed Pistons, but here we are.
Yeah, you look at these stats from last night where Paolo was like 4 for 18 from the field. Jalen, I know everyone's talking about Jalen was 1 for 13, 5 points, but plus 17. How, with those terrible stats, how did the Magic get it done last night?
There's two sides of the ball, right? I mean, for Jalen Suggs to be plus 17 on that poor of a shooting night really shows just how much of a defensive disruptor he was and continues to be for this Magic team. I mean, he's so important on that end, especially as the point of attack defender. That was something that, when they didn't have him for much of the second half of last year, and especially in the playoffs against Boston, they didn't have that. And now they do. And Jalen said, he had told me multiple times before this series started that he had been waiting all year for this series, for this moment, for the postseason to be able to take the court with his guys and show that, he is more like himself in 23-24 than he has been in the last year. So I just think between him, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Jamal Cain, all of these big bodies, they're just more physical. They're bigger, and they really impose their will on the defensive end. Like the fact that they held Detroit to 36 points in the second half is really hard to do in the modern NBA. And the reality is they also only scored 40 points themselves in the second half. But I would like to say the uglier the better, I think, for this team. So that's what really stood out to me, was just the defensive intensity that they brought.
It was very interesting last night. You're there courtside. You're there at every game, home and away. And again, you do a great job with the Orlando Sentinel. So there's this weird energy in the building. People are excited. They're also nervous. 3 minutes to go, just like game 3. It's only a 1-possession game. And it just felt like the Magic, they just kept making a smart play. What did you see down the stretch that the Magic did and the Pistons did not?
They stayed composed. I mean, that's the biggest thing. That's the word Jamal Mosley used, composure. And I think that's what's really stunning to me is we didn't see any of this in the regular season. And obviously, Franz Wagner missed a bunch of games. Paolo was missing time. Jalen missed a little bit of time, but Franz obviously was the big one. And Anthony Black missed, near the end of the season, plus almost 20 games. So, but still, regardless of who's on the floor, every time there was a team that made a run at this group, they just crumbled. They crumbled under the pressure. They made poor decisions. They took bad shots. And like, I'm not going to say the shot selection was great down the stretch, but certainly they remained composed as best they could. And I think that's just something we didn't see in the regular season. I mean, you go back to all these different games. I mean, if you inbound the ball against the Lakers, if you don't lose to the Pacers, if you beat the main Celtics on the final day of the regular season, they're in a completely different spot in the playoffs. And the reality is they flipped the switch at the right time. It's now back-to-back games where the game was tied with not much time left, and the Magic ended on this great run. I mean, they ended game 3, I believe, on an 8-0 run, 9-0 run, and last night was 9-3 run after the game was tied 85. And it's really remarkable to see, especially for a team that struggled specifically at times when opponents would make those sorts of pushes and they'd crumble under that. Now they aren't.
We joked before the game that the ball bounced the Magic way with the Paolo 3-point shot. We were laughing about it. I know Paolo was kind of laughing about it as well. And then last night, Desmond Bane, game on the line, banks in the 3. Is the ball just right now going into game 5? Is the ball bouncing the Magic way?
It seems like it. I mean, I like what Paolo said after his shot. He said in Philadelphia that the basketball gods don't reward hesitancy, and these guys aren't playing with hesitancy anymore. They're playing with poise. They're playing with decisiveness. That's the biggest thing. They know what they're doing and they believe in what they're doing. Like, we didn't see that belief from them, that confidence throughout the entire regular season. It was always in spurts. It was never consistent. And I think with Bane, when you have a guy like that who shot 3 for 15 the first two games, and he comes out in game three and hits 7 threes and follows it up with 5 more, and of course the fifth one being the biggest. That's shooter's confidence goes a long way, and when he's seen the ball go through the hoop like that, that travels, I think, too.
Okay, then. So game 5, again, I'm still in shock we're in this situation to maybe possibly close out the Detroit Pistons. If you're Desmond Bane, should he shoot more from the outside moving forward in this series?
I mean, as long as it makes sense. I mean, I don't think you should hesitate or pass up open shots. That's something we saw, really at certain times in the regular season where, the guys were always trying to make the right play, but it felt like at certain points they were overpassing. And I think when you're Desmond Bane, the Orlando Magic traded for you to do one thing, and that's shoot the ball. And now that he's seen the ball go through the hoop, we'll be interested to see how that, if that translates on the road or not. But I think certainly, it's working right now for him. I wouldn't expect him to suddenly stop shooting the ball like that. So, we'll see what happens on the road. It's going to be a ridiculous environment, hostile, whatever word you want to use. Detroit's going to be as desperate as they ever have been. And I think that the Magic have an opportunity here to really use that pressure against them and, play with more composure like we saw in game 4.
Okay, so I keep saying the last couple of days, this idea of the Magic have only played one bad quarter, and it was that third quarter in game 2 where the Pistons just went crazy scoring 40 plus. What happened? You were there. What happened in that third quarter in game 2?
Detroit turned up the heat. I mean, they sped up the Magic. It's weird. It's like there's this tricky balance for Orlando. They want to play with pace. They want to get out and running. But they can't play chaotically. It kind of reminds me of Jalen Suggs a little bit, quite frankly, as an individual player. Like Jalen, I think before the season, he said that he was playing at 200 miles an hour before. And now his goal was trying to play at 100 miles an hour, which is still really fast, obviously. But I think what we saw in that game was, for whatever reason, Orlando didn't come out of the half correctly, obviously, and there was that offensive foul on Bane where he kicked his leg out and kind of threw the Magic off their balance a little bit. And what we saw was Detroit jump on that. And I think obviously when you go on those sorts of runs, as we've seen the last 2 games, the home crowd really goes a long way. I mean, it really does. And we just saw Detroit, take advantage of that, have the wind in their back. And I think they just sort of sped the Magic up a little bit. They pressured them a ton on defense. They wouldn't let them get into their actions. And I think, when you turn the ball over a ton, as we saw in game 4 with Detroit, that's where, it really snowfalls, really, avalanche happens and they go on a run that's just too much to overcome. I think what was key in that game was the fact that Orlando actually played pretty well in the fourth quarter. And then we kind of saw that success that they had late translate into game 3 when they returned home. And I think that, even though they didn't win that game, they really felt like they let that one slip away, which, credit to Detroit. They had to win that one to avoid a 2-0 hole. But the Magic have felt like this series has always been about them more than the Pistons.
Okay, I know you're monitoring with Franz. Okay, I get it. You're not a doctor.
I really am. I really am on my phone monitoring with Franz.
I know. No, I get it. And I know you're going to keep us posted. While it posts, maybe there'll be an update later in the day. But my question for you then is, how important is Franz to this basketball team moving forward if they want to make a deep playoff run?
Extremely important. I know that's an obvious statement, but here's the reason why. The fact that he can get downhill when it seemed like in game 4, there was a point where, Orlando came out hitting those first 2 threes. They scored the first 8 points of the game. The crowd was behind them and everything was going their way. And then we saw Detroit completely dominate the second half of that first quarter. And Orlando really seemed to get away from going into the paint. Scoring points in the paint is so critical for this team. And they really settled for some threes. I mean, sometimes you have to shoot the open ball, but when Franz was able to come back in that second quarter and that third quarter especially, he was getting downhill. He was getting to the free throw line. He was finishing around the rim. And then defensively, when you can place a guy like Franz Wagner on a Cade Cunningham or whoever it might be, mainly Cade though, his length goes such a long way. And that's where you can see the switching defense. You switch off of Franz and you get Wendell Carter on Cade or Jamal Cain eventually helping him out there. That's where it goes such a long way. And I think for as much credit as Franz gets on offense, he deserves more credit on defense because he really has been one of the best two-way players the last couple of years. We just haven't seen it a lot this season, of course, and for part of last year as well. So Franz is extremely important. It can't be understated enough. And I think his status, not just for this game 5, is going to be important, but I think moving forward, we haven't gotten an update yet. He was in good spirits. He spoke after the game in the locker room. He told me that he felt like, his right calf tightened up on him a little bit. He's hopeful that it's going to feel better. I think it was, these guys are dealing with everything under the sun at this point in the year on both teams. And I think when you have an injury like that, you want to be extremely careful, especially with calves. So we'll see what the update is after he undergoes an MRI. But obviously on both ends of the floor, he's extremely important for this Magic team.
Can you just clarify to all the basketball fans out there how big Franz Wagner is in person? Because I don't think people realize, this front court, I keep yelling this, 6'10", 6'10", 6'11", Paolo, Franz, and Wendell. They are big. Isn't this a big front court for the Magic?
And that's what's giving Detroit so many problems, because throughout the entire regular season, when they won the 60 games and earned the top seed, they were the bigger physical team. And we saw, obviously, Orlando and Detroit faced off in the regular season, and both teams had success at certain times against one another, with Orlando winning the cup game in late November. But, I think the reality is this is just a really bad matchup for Detroit. I don't know, obviously Orlando has to get the 4th win to win this series, and whatever happens beyond that happens. But, they're really giving Detroit a lot of trouble. Cade Cunningham's turning the ball over a ton. He has 24 turnovers, I think, in the last couple of games. And that's because of their size. I mean, they really make things extremely difficult. They're packing the paint. They're defending on the perimeter really well, and they're forcing turnovers. So this size is a problem. And I think it's really like when you speak with Jeff Waltman and Jamal Mosley and you say, what's changed? And they say, we're healthy now. That's, to their credit, where it's like, okay, this is how this team was supposed to look the entire year, right? You have Franz Wagner in the starting lineup, and you have Anthony Black coming off the bench. And that's where you see, even when you go to your bench, you still have size and AB and Tristan Da Silva. And that's, the size goes a long way, because that's where the physicality comes in. That's where you see the defensive identity really come out. And that's something that they missed the entire year.
Was the Kane dunk on your end of the hoop? Were you right there, or are you on the other side? Where were you? I'm fortunate enough to sit courtside, but I'm more in the middle of the court, so I can kind of see both ends. I'm right by the scorers table, so I can hear the reviews, whenever teams are making challenges or coaches are calling out plays or whatever it might be. So it was to my right when I was looking off to the side, and he just had that cut. I mean, that cut that he made, it seemed like it was just like a full head of steam, and he took up, and it was remarkable. I mean, it really was. It was like, where did that come from? He's so athletic, and it's really a great story. I mean, he literally grew up a Pistons fan. He's from Michigan. He said he's put his friends and family in a really tough position right now with the way he's playing and the way the Magic are playing, which is funny to hear. But just the fact that, I wrote about this in the, yesterday in today's paper now. Jamal Cain was actually a member of the Miami Heat that went to the finals as an 8th seed. He wasn't able to play in that run because he's been a two-way player for most of his first 4 years in the league. This season, when he signed a standard contract, was the first time that he's been on a standard contract, which makes him eligible for the playoffs. Two-way players aren't eligible for the postseason. But the fact that he's performing this way on this level in such little amount of time. Maybe it could be more time if Franz Wagner misses any time, but he's really defined his role well, carved out a little, spot on this team. And I think, they have a team option for his contract for next season. I would be surprised if they didn't pick that up, just because of the way he's playing on the stage for the first time. There was a play on the other end, but everyone in the stadium was still kind of shook by what happened. It was a wild. That's what's great with sports. You never know what you might see. It was really cool. It was dude, it was nuts. And by the way, I'll end with this, and I appreciate coming on. So going to the arena last night, it goes Vegas favors Detroit by 3.5. And I go, wait a minute, timeout. Has Detroit been favored in every game this series? Because they're going to be favored in game 5 as well. dude, you know what? I still understand this series. I don't get it at the end of the day. Do you?
And maybe that makes perfect sense for this team because nothing has made sense this entire season. I mean, the expectations have completely warped this series. I mean, right? If you spoke to anyone before the season began, everybody had Orlando in the Eastern Conference Finals as a top 5 seed, home court advantage in the East, and here they come crawling as slowly as possible on the brink of elimination against the Charlotte Hornets in the playing game. They have to fight their way through, and now here they are. And they've said it. It's a new season, it's new energy, and it's a completely different team. I mean, it's been remarkable to watch up close. It's a lot of fun.
I want them to close them out, and then I want Cleveland. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? I'm still thinking about 2 years ago. Jason Beede, Orlando Sentinel, thank you so much for coming on, and good luck with your Game 5 coverage, all right?
Thank you so much.